Prime Minister is promising no additional exemptions to carbon price carve-outs, including for natural gas. The statement from Justin Trudeau came after he announced a sudden pause on home heating oil carbon pricing. The policy exemption is limited to just home heating oil, which is most common in Atlantic Canada, and naturally, in response, premiers from the Prairies and Ontario have immediately cried foul to the announcement. Joining us now to discuss the carve-out and to unpack the growing debate over carbon pricing is Cole Hogan, principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. Cole, thank you very much for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having me.
So on the exemption, there appears to be some major regional disparities at play here, where some provinces have significant benefits and others have little. What exactly are those regional differences?
Well, the regional difference is that heating oil is used mostly in Atlantic Canada, in PEI, and Nova Scotia. Heating oil accounts for about 40% of residential heating in PEI and above 30% in Nova Scotia. Across Western Canada, for example, heating oil isn't used at all. In comparison, Western Canada uses mainly natural gas for residential heating. This means heating oil will be exempt from the carbon tax for the next 3 years, while other forms of home heating across the country will still have the carbon tax applied.
And what are the savings for those who are in Atlantic Canada?
They seem to be minuscule. The last numbers that I looked at said that eliminating the carbon tax in PEI in particular will save people there only 11% on a liter of heating oil, making it still more expensive than the alternatives.
And sorry, by the alternatives, you mean things like natural gas or other home heating sources?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. And what is the justification coming from Ottawa for exempting just home heating oil and not natural gas?
You know, the Prime Minister didn't seem to have a very detailed answer to that question. The press release from last week was titled "Lowering Energy Bills for Canadians Across the Country," but it only applies to Atlantic Canada. And even with the carbon tax exemption, it can cost up to 4 times as much to generate the same amount of heat with oil as it does with natural gas.
Yeah, and I mean, so I guess the argument there, I'm interested to see if you agree, is that it's essentially incentivizing home heating that has more emissions, or the less climate-friendly option. Is that a correct assessment?
Oh, absolutely. The exemption is rewarding energy sources that are worse for the environment. Like I mentioned, most homes in Western Canada are heated with natural gas, which is a lower carbon emitting source than oil. The government's policy isn't benefiting the environment or Canadians' wallets.
And so, I mean, a lot of people have commented on this, saying that the move is political, given the regional disparities and differences. Can you walk us through what the thought process may be in terms of a policy that disproportionately benefits those in Atlantic Canada?
Yeah, while saying that the policy isn't politically regionally motivated, it appears to be, the reaction has been widely viewed as cynical and merely an attempt to save Liberal seats in the next election, since they're tanking in the polls. You know, they flip-flopped on the carbon tax, and in doing so, admitted that the tax isn't affordable for Canadians. And not only that, but they've also rubbed salt in the wound for Western Canadians. Minister Hutchings told CTV last week that people in the prairie should elect more Liberals if they want to have conversations around exemptions from the carbon tax. But let me tell you, that comment will have the complete opposite effect. That quote will live in infamy. "Screw the West, we'll take the rest" used to be a famous Liberal electoral strategy, but now the Trudeau Liberals have taken that strategy and turned it into official government policy.
And on the other side, critics have said that the move is a complete betrayal of the government's commitment to reduced emissions. Do you share that view?
Absolutely. The Trudeau government has completely undercut not only their signature policy, but their signature politics with this decision. They've said that the carbon tax rebates are a net positive to families, but they're also going to get rid of the tax because of the cost to Canadians. They've also said the carbon tax is an effective tool to reduce emissions, but then they're revoking it in this instance with home heating oil, which creates more emissions than natural gas. So they're continuously contradicting themselves, and the carbon tax is no longer credible. You know, there was a recent parliamentary budget officer study that stated that 60% of households are financially burdened by the carbon tax, And with this move, the Liberals are again admitting that the carbon tax isn't affordable for Canadians, and it sure isn't revenue neutral, which we've been debating for years.
Cole, we know that Premier Moe, the Premier of Saskatchewan, has said that the province plans to stop collecting the carbon tax unless there's a natural gas exemption. Is that legal or even possible?
In terms of legality, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But Saskatchewan's provincial gas utility is Sask Energy, which is a crown corporation, and allows Premier Moe to direct them to do that. Moe stated his government won't collect or submit the tax to the federal government unless Ottawa provides that exemption. He's also stated that the federal government has created two classes of taxpayers by following through with this policy, and it's an exemption that only really applies to one part of the country, therefore excluding Saskatchewan. But I have to say that this move has been so unpopular in Saskatchewan. The legislature voted unanimously against it. The governing Sask party and the opposition NDP voted for Moe's motion to not collect or submit the carbon tax from natural gas unless the Liberals offer that exemption. A rare moment of unity in the Saskatchewan provincial chamber.
Well, and things recently heated up even more so when the minister responsible for Sask Energy said that he was willing to go to jail over not collecting the carbon tax. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not surprised with that sentiment. I think we've seen in Alberta with the Sovereignty Act, even the threat of the Sovereignty Act, we've seen a rationing up of the rhetoric. We've seen opposition to the net zero plans, even again from the Saskatchewan NDP in particular. So across the prairies, we're seeing provincial energy ministers and provincial premiers really draw a line in the sand and say, hey, these policies are detrimental to our natural resource sector here in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
And I mean, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has said that the Liberals are essentially afraid of his Axe the Tax campaign, which he claims is gaining steam. Do you think that there is evidence to suggest that there is momentum for either additional carve-outs, regardless of what the Prime Minister may have said, or a push to peel back or remove the carbon tax altogether?
Yeah, in terms of political gamesmanship, the Trudeau government and, the Liberal Party scheduled the announcement on heating oil exactly when Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, was launching a rally in Atlantic Canada. So, there's political timing here in terms of just, the political move altogether to make the policy move in the first place. So Pierre Poilievre has called for an exemption on all forms of home heating. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has called for an exemption on GST for home heating, and the list will go on and on. The federal government will eventually cave to a few of these exemptions. I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Potentially they'll cave to others. Maybe the carbon tax will be gone altogether.
What makes you say that they'll eventually cave?
I think that, for a prime minister and a political leader that has been accused of regional divisions and sowing those regional divisions, eventually you're going to have to carve out other fuel exemptions for other regions. BC will have something to say about it. I'm sure Doug Ford in Ontario might as well. And, Alberta and Saskatchewan just began that course of voices.
Do you think this highlights maybe a bigger trend on the tension between provinces and the federal government?
Absolutely. I think, you've seen the Tell the Feds campaign from the Alberta government, which was all around the net zero plans and the fact that, Alberta is more than 80% powered by natural gas. Homes are heated with natural gas there, and switching to a net zero grid in their timeline just isn't reasonable. If I were the Alberta government, I would tweak that campaign just a little bit and start going in on the carbon tax and say, look, just like the net zero plan, this is also detrimental to our region in particular, and we need the feds to work with us instead of against us and pitting region against region in terms of exemptions for the carbon tax, which is clearly, impacting the cost of living for Canadians.
And I guess the bigger question here is, how do we balance competing interests? Poll after poll shows that climate initiatives are a passion for Canadians. How do we balance affordability and effective climate policy moving forward? We have about 45 seconds or so.
Well, I think that'll be an ongoing battle between the premiers and the prime minister. I think as we go into an election, this will be this will be a primary issue and one that we'll see a lot of back and forth on. In the meantime, I'll be interested to see if there are additional carve-outs for additional fuels in the future, province by province, and then we might have this patchwork. Pierre Poilievre has just said, let's axe the tax for all home heating across the country. And that might be a nice move and maybe something the Liberals can say they plan to do all along. But, maybe to finish, perhaps I'll quote the University of Calgary professor Trevor Toome that said, the entire future path of Canada's carbon tax is now no longer credible.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.